Hi, I'm Paulina Cameron with the Forum for Women Entrepreneurs. We're a Canadian organization that energizes, educates, mentors, and connects women entrepreneurs to be wildly successful, promoting strong economies and thriving communities. As part of our Pitch for the Purse program, this webinar focuses on beyond bootstrapping, the how and why. With us today, we have the incredible Tracey McVicar of CAI Capital Partners joining us. Hi, Tracey.
Hi, thank you for having me today.
So good to have you. So we're going to dive right in. Can you tell us, when should an entrepreneur start thinking about going beyond bootstrapping, and what does that even mean?
Sure. Well, let's first talk about what bootstrapping means. So bootstrapping your business is really taking every available resource in your own sphere, so that's your own resources, including your time, the resources of your friends and family who are willing to support your enterprise, and a conservative level of debt that doesn't keep you up at night. So that's what I call own resources. And then the free money that's available out there that FWE is really good at putting people in touch with and educating on, and I know that's a separate webinar, but so free money, friends and family money, conservative debt, and your own time and personal resources. Once you've exhausted all those, that's kind of the bootstrapping time, and then it is a question of if the business cannot by that time fund its own growth through cash flow, you have a pause in life where you say, where am I going to take this and how am I going to get there? It should be a pause because it's more challenging to take outside money, particularly when you're not a hockey stick, very fast growing, the next Uber, the next Tinder, the next Whole Foods, Amazon, and most of us aren't. So if we're very realistic, we're trying to build solid, cash flowing, growing businesses that are sustainable and good employers, etc. So for those kind of businesses, the moment of truth is really, I've got it to a point where I've exhausted all my bootstrap resources and I'm still not cash flowing enough to fund the growth of the business. Should I switch gears, slow it down so that my existing business can fund what I need to do, or should I take the big leap and really go external for investors? And I think we're going to talk about what that means.
So say you are at that phase, you have some great opportunities coming up, your revenue, you have cash flow, you're building up to it. How do you start thinking about that?
So I would start thinking about really how I've built the business in order to attract an outside investor. And there are lots of ways, lots of areas that you need to think about, but one of them would be, am I making it tax efficient for me, but bringing in an outside investor would mean that I lose some of those benefits, which are, running certain expenses through the company, and this is all very acceptable practice for sole proprietorships, but when it comes to bringing in an outside investor, you kind of have to clean all that up, and there's a real financial benefit to doing some of those things. So that's really a cost of bringing in outside investors. Also, where will the money that I am looking for take my business, and at that point, will I be able to maybe buy back these, repay the capital? Will it be structured in that way? Will I then have to do another round to support the next round of growth? I mean, there are a lot of questions, but most people don't get beyond really the first, which is, I can do this with cash flow now, and I don't want to disrupt any arrangements I might have and how I've structured my business to benefit my life.
And so you've talked about kind of those rounds. So seed round being the first, and Series A, B, C. Can you explain in a nutshell what those mean?
Yeah, we certainly see in the press, and we see Series A, Series B, Series C, seed round, friends and family. So I think if I were to assure people that only the very high growth, high need pre-revenue, high need for capital businesses even get into the realm where they're issuing layers of securities and different rounds. So this is more of an educational piece, but when truly institutional professional investors come into the life and the growth of a very fast growing business, and there are businesses that go from 0 to 2,000 employees in 3 years, and this is sort of the range that we're talking.
Small percentage.
Yes, yes. So Series A round, B round, and C round are successive financings to support the growth of the business. The ideal is that each financing is completed at a higher valuation than the last. And I'll just segue into, the seed round comes before the A round. The A round is really the place where truly institutional investors that we would know as venture capitalists kind of come in and involve themselves.
What amount is usually typical in that stage?
Oh, it could be, it's usually $1 million and up. Sometimes very large. But usually a minimum of $1 million. So you've got legal costs and advisory costs. There's a lot of costs associated with it. So you don't want to be trying to raise just a tiny amount of money, and that just doesn't really happen because of all the friction that is associated. So that's kind of the terminology, but I'd emphasize that it's a real small subset of startups and continuing growth businesses that are accessing those kind of layers of capital.
And then another term, if we're on terminology that gets thrown around a lot, is an exit.
Sure.
What does that mean, and what happens to an entrepreneur who perhaps isn't going down that road, doesn't think they have one? How can they think about bringing value to someone who's bringing in investment?
It's definitely more challenging to bring in external investment when into a smaller, slower growing private business, because it is a fair question for an outside investor to ask, like, after all this, how am I going to get my money back? I've seen lots of instances where there are buyout provisions. Quite often you don't know at what price. So there's not many investors that would agree to be bought out at, they would figure out that price today. They would like a formula that will mean they get paid more if the company is successful. And let's face it, if the company's not successful, it's going to be kind of not an issue because no one's getting their money back. So it can be done. It's a little bit challenging, which is why I kind of call it this mountain moment where after all the bootstrapping is done, I think you've got to really, as an entrepreneur, look at yourself in the mirror and say, can this business fund its own growth through cash flow, or and if not, is it really a business that should have external capital, and is the business plan so good that we're going to be able to go forward with outside money that's not friends and family.
And that will have those kinds of returns where the cost of it makes sense.
Exactly.
So what about a conventional business? Say someone has, a storefront or a restaurant, perhaps one, maybe two locations, and they want to expand and grow. How should they think about that process and structuring that?
I think there are there are many businesses like that. So one door, whether it's food or retail, one door trying to get to 5 doors or 10 doors. And I'd say the first thing is sort of landlord inducements. Like, again, it's like, what kind of free money can I get for fixturing, for handling some of those upfront costs in a less conventional way without going external? How much can my one existing store fund? You know, the really normal way of growing is that the first store funds the second store, the second store funds the third. And I think that when investors see a pattern like that, they get very excited because they don't want to be funding the fifth store and the sixth store. They want at some point for the organism to start funding its own growth. Even your outside investors want that.
And so if you're kind of going down that path and thinking about it, should you raise more money right away now to fund the whole path or not? And, you know, layered in that question is, statistically, we hear that women will ask for less money than what they actually need. Just curious if that's been your experience and how they get to think about structuring that better.
So I'll take the first question first, which is, you know, I don't find that women ask for not enough or less money than a man would ask for. I find they don't ask at all. And there are certain businesses where I look and I say, you know, you're very fundable. This, like, you were fundable 3-4 years ago. Why didn't you take those steps? Maybe lack of knowledge, maybe lack of confidence, but I find it more often that they didn't ask at all and maybe missed an opportunity. So there's a real balance between, you've got to be realistic about the prospects for the business, and it helps to get outside views that are sort of willing to give you the hard news. But it also willing to give you encouragement if it is a great fundable business that really should, you know, should be out there seeking external money.
Great. And so the second part of the question would be, you know, should you, say you are at 1 to 2 stores now and you want to get to 10, do you now raise for 10? Do you raise for 3 to 5? How do you design that path?
So in that example, you know, you want to raise enough that it will take you comfortably to the next milestone where your business is probably worth more. So I'd advise against taking all the money. You're going to give up most of your business in order to take money that would notionally get you to 10 stores. One, you might be cash flowing enough through that time to get you there, or at least to contribute. So there's a real balance between taking too much money and giving up too much of your business, and taking not enough and then having to go back without having achieved much in the way of incrementally increasing the value of your business.
So if you're able to get yourself to raise enough to get, say, from 1 to 2 to say 3 to 5, you can then value your business higher to get to the next 10 stores to support them.
And then end up at the end with more equity than if you took all the money up front.
Right. And probably make your investors happier along the line. Okay, so is there anything else that you see from your experience, anecdotally or otherwise, of how women approach investing versus men?
I've seen, I have a dear friend, and I gave her hard advice one day because she had been toiling at the same idea for, you know, probably 8 or 9 years. And the business grew a lot at the beginning, and then it plateaued, and it sort of was on this very slow decline for lots of reasons. Like, you know,
she was probably early to market.
She was way ahead of the market and got some real traction, and then had some issues with production and then family and different things that caused her to not be able to devote as much time, and kept on coming back to it because it really was promising. But, you know, my advice to her that I think maybe changed her view was, you know, think of the alternative. And she had been a successful corporate executive. You know, the alternative for you is to go back and get a corporate job that's inspiring to you. what would you make in that job? And I think she said, you know, $120,000 a year. And I said, well, how much of your product do you have to sell, top line, to pay yourself $120,000 a year? And it was a big number. The margins were not that good and getting squeezed. She wasn't at scale to really get her costs down. You know, she was going to have to sell $3 or $4 million of product to pay herself $120,000.
Which is probably a lot more than her top line was.
Absolutely, yeah. Her top line wasn't $1 million. So, you know, I think that was a moment of reckoning where it's one way to visualize, like, maybe I should move on. You know, you hate to see it, but I also hate to see, you know, 8 or 10 productive years come to naught, rather than when it could have been 2 or 3.
That's right. And
right?
I mean, there's no shame in that. It's
None.
It's not quitting forever.
No.
At all.
Next idea, move on. Like, it's allowing you to go on to the next idea. Or, you know, I know lots of people who have done their startup on the side while working, which is a form of funding, really. So, you know, there is nothing wrong with that, but I do think that sometimes, because we won't ask, and because we're sometimes not confident to ask, we don't even ask the hard questions like, should I be doing this?
And it is such a hard question. And the instinct, especially when it's someone that you know personally, is to encourage.
Absolutely.
Which might not always be the most helpful thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I think men sometimes will fast fail much faster than we will. And you know, that works for some. And you know, I think that I love women entrepreneurs, and I love the passion and the real skill and art of growing a business. And I think that we can, you know, with good advice around, we can really make changes.
I agree. Okay, what are your final words of wisdom and advice?
So after all that, I'm gonna say, do not quit. Keep on going. Seek peer advice, outside advice from organizations like FWE. Like, they're just, if you're gonna toil in your garage for years and years, never knowing whether your product makes sense or your service makes sense, you don't have to. You really don't. And it's just so rewarding to see all of the success that we've been able to support over the years.
I agree. Thank you so much, Tracey.
You're welcome.
Thank you to Tracey McVicar of CAI Capital Partners for her time and expertise. And thank you for watching this webinar. Our goal for this educational component of FWE's Pitch for the Purse program are tangible takeaways that you can use, apply to your business, and to help you pitch and raise money. You can find other webinars and additional resources on fwe.ca.